All right, good evening. I'd like to reconvene this regular meeting of the Board of Directors here on Thursday, February 27, 2014. The meeting began at 6. We agreed on the agenda, and then we adjourned into executive session to discuss legal matters. And now, as we reconvene, we are at just ending agenda item C and heading into agenda item D. But before we do, coming out of executive session, we have a motion, and I will read that motion now. Move that the Reston Association take no further action regarding the previously filed release of notice of claim violation on the property located at 1522 Park Glen Court. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Noes, nay.
Nay.
Abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, and now on to agenda item D, approval of the board minutes of January 23rd, 2013, regular board meeting, regular board directors meeting. I entertain a motion.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion on the minutes? Any corrections, clarifications, anything? Hearing none, I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of the minutes as presented, please say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. And now, if Secretary Layton will get the sign-in sheet, we have member and board comments. And as we do this, I guess I will just reintroduce myself. I'm Andy Siegel. I'm the Vice President of the board. President Knieven is away this evening, so I'm pinch hitting. So thank you for your attendance, and again, welcome. All right, well, we have several members who have signed in to speak. If you're speaking as an individual, you'll have 3 minutes. Please, when you come up to the podium, state your name and address. If you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you'll have 5 minutes. And again, please state your name, address, and the organization that you're representing. So with that, the first to sign in is, and again, please forgive any mispronunciations, Wilfredo Padden. Wilfredo, you want to come up to the podium and again state your name in the proper way, as opposed to the way I did it, and then your address.
You did great.
Okay, thank you, Wilfredo.
My name is Wilfredo Padden. I've been an owner of a restaurant club here at 2326 Beacon Court. I've been in 22C for about 11 years. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Last year, I had an issue with not payment of the restaurant association fees. I apologize for that. And I've been in contact with Chadwick, Washington, and they told me to come here and seek advice from the board as far as trying to come up with payment, maybe settle in a couple of months or something like that. So I just came here to see if there was anyone that could help me out so that we could settle this promptly and get this out of the way and get the record. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Wilfredo. Next on the list is Gerald Beloy. His friends call him Jerry.
Good evening, I'm Jerry Beloy, and while I'm running for the Reston Association Board of Directors, I'm not here to speak about myself. You can learn all about me at Beloy 4RA, Beloy the number 4RA.com. But I am here tonight to listen and to learn about the challenges that you as a board face, and
just for the record, 2140 South Bay Lane, Reston. Next, John Bowman, look at him, he read everyone's mind with a sheet.
No. John Bowman, 1222949, Reston. Some of us, I don't know if I fit into either categories that you described. I don't know if I can call you Jerry. So anyway, I come before you to support the request from the Pedestrian Bicycle Committee on the letter to the Park Authority, and to offer two thoughts on that letter for your consideration. For those of you who know me or have known me for a while, you'll know that one of my pet peeves about Reston is we tend to be too myopic and think about things just within our border, and that there are a lot of external issues that affect Reston residents, and Reston residents go outside of Reston once in a while. And so, while the letter asks, that is presented to you, asks the Park Authority to plow and de-ice the WNOD path within Reston, I would submit you should consider, and I know they probably talked about this for a while, but I'm talking for myself now, so I don't have to. It needs to be more than that, because I ride the WNOD all the way to Gallows Road, and I've lost weeks this year because the path is not plowed. Okay? And I'm sure there are other riders who've lost weeks. Now, I'm sure there are others who are more hardy than me, and they got in roads that I wouldn't get in. Lots of snow creates lots of issues. I do three things that I don't like ice on. I fly airplanes, I ride motorcycles, and I ride bicycles. None of them go well together. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would ask you to consider, and I'm sure great thought will be given to who the letter would be copied to. But our friends in Fairfax County, particularly the Board of Supervisors, have been spending a lot of effort and time and resources to make multi-mode transportation available throughout the county and as a viable means. And I would encourage you to encourage them to get on their holy pulpit to assist the Parks Authority to understand that they need to help the county achieve that goal also. So those are my two thoughts. Thank you for your time. And someone said it was going to snow. I don't know if that's true.
Thank you, John. All right, and the last sign-in was to Colin Mills.
Good evening. I am Colin Mills. I live at 1932B, Willow Ridge Drive. And although I am president of the Reston Citizens Association, tonight I'm speaking on my own behalf. I just wanted to thank and compliment you guys on the tremendous forum that you did last night about the coming of the Silver Line and what that's going to mean for our community. It was a tremendous event. It was extremely informative. And I really appreciated the enthusiasm about the coming of the Metro that all of the participants expressed, and that I also feel. I compare it to the forum that RCA, RA, and ARCH all co-sponsored on the master plan last fall. And I think that these are exactly the kind of forums that RA should be holding. And I think that the turnout at both events shows that the public appreciates it as much as we do. And I am, like Jerry, running for the RA board, colin4eston.blogspot.com. And if I am elected to the RA board, I look forward to helping you plan more forums of this sort. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. All right, before we move to the next agenda item, is there anyone who did not sign in who would like to have a chance to have a comment? State your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Lucinda Shannon. I live at 11593 Redleaf Court, and I'm very excited to be here. I've been attending a lot of meetings. I was at the Transportation Forum last night. It was fabulous. I'm learning so much. I'm running for the board, and every day I learn something new about the Reston Association and the board and how it works, and it's really exciting for me. I really look forward to working with you all and helping out. Like, you know, I'm really open to new projects and new topics and learning new things. And I'm going to do my homework and be at all the meetings. So I just wanted to say I'm very excited. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. State your name and address, Mason.
Mason Miller, 2027 Lake Breezeway, Reston. I'm also running for Reston Association Board of Directors, and I thought I would regret it if I didn't take a moment to introduce myself. One of the issues that I know that's coming up before the board has to do with RELAC, and I thought that Eve Thompson's revised resolution went a long way towards addressing a lot of concerns I had about it. But I do know that in the area of the notice of violation, I wanted to make sure that somehow you guys address in the language that we wouldn't end up leaning somebody's property or putting something on record with the county that could cause title problems later on if they need to refinance. If the notice of violation to be kept in-house at Reston, so that then the owner's been put on notice, it seems to me that ought to be sufficient enough to prevent a transfer without, these things getting corrected. Okay. But that was my only thing as far as business there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mason. All right. Any others who didn't sign up would like to speak? Okay. Thank you very much. And with that, how about if we head around the table to see what our team has to say here. So if we start with Secretary Layton.
I just wish to thank Andy for running the meeting tonight, and wish to thank everyone who came to the meeting tonight. I think it was a nice crowd here now. It's Easter.
Just glad to be here.
I'm glad to be here tonight. It's warm inside, and I too want to add my congratulations to a great meeting last night.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. It was such a cold night, I'll tell you. Couple things. Supervisor Hudgens will be holding a budget meeting on Saturday at Bryan Park and starts at 8 a.m. And I think the actual meeting starts at 9 a.m. Is that correct, Kathleen?
It's not just the budget meeting, there'll be lots of other information.
Okay. So anyway, she will be holding a meeting and you're all invited to attend. The other thing, on Monday, we had a meeting regarding the Lake Ann Fellowship House, and that was quite informative. The attendance was great, and it answered a lot of questions that I had and a lot of the apprehension I had about the Fellowship House and how it's going to be built in-house. So it was really a very, very meaningful meeting. Also, the Reston Museum, for the last month, this happens to be Black History Month, we've been celebrating with 3 wonderful programs. Also, looking and embracing Reston's diversity. Our first program was a woman who was an author who's written 4 fantastic books, inspirational and motivational. On Saturday, we had the 3 divas here at the museum, Beverly Calsham, Alicia Crawley, and Minda Ahart, and that was an absolutely wonderful evening. They did all of the Ellington music, which was absolutely fabulous. And then last night, unfortunately, we had a conflict because we all wanted to be here. But we were down at the Lake Ann Community Center. We had a panel of individuals who grew up in Reston, went away to school, came back to Reston, and now they're raising their families in Reston. So it was quite an interesting and wonderful opportunity to share some wonderful information about Reston and also about Simon's 7 principles. And really the theme was, will those principles still be as relevant 15 or 20 years from now? And listening to the panel, I think they will be. So it was quite reassuring. It gave me good sleep last night. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ellen. Sabrina.
Pleased to be here. Thank you.
I'm just pleased to be here, and I also want to thank all the candidates who come out tonight to participate and everyone else. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Likewise, I really appreciate appreciate the interest of Restonians to step out and run for open positions on the board as well as on the many committees. And I see that DRB has some additional openings, so if you know anybody, by all means. Two items. I walked from where I live in North Reston to where I work in South Reston by Hunter Mills. And of course I did it not on a nice warm day, I did it yesterday in the middle of a snowstorm. Primarily to experience what it is to walk on Reston's sidewalks and trails and whatnot. And it was a wonderful walk. It was a little bit slippery. I intend to do it much more, but it really gave me an eye-opening as to the many small steps that we can take to make Reston a much more walkable community. I noticed in the board packet there's a PBAC report that prioritizes investments that we need to encourage to make the community much more walkable. I'm going to bring that issue to the Environmental Advisory Committee to encourage them to endorse that list. I think a list such as this, and I see Burton in the back, is exactly what we need. I think that if we can speak with one voice to the county, to the state, hopefully we'll get the amenities that we need. Very briefly, second point, as some of you know, I've been very active with Reston Tennis, youth tennis, JTT. Really appreciate the support that I'm getting from Mayor Conaway on that. First ever, we're going to field 2 junior team tennis teams at the 12 and under, 14 and under. Those teams have already played 2 matches. They'll be playing another one this Saturday. They've got 7 more for the rest of the season. Just really excited to see young kids playing tennis from Reston throughout the year. Very glad to be here. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, wanted to also congratulate the groups that put together the transportation forum that we had last night. That was put together by the efforts of our Transportation Advisory Committee, our Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee, and our Reston Neighborhood Advisory Committee. They did a fantastic job bringing everybody together, and I want to give special thanks to Catherine Martin, who really put a lot of time and effort into that and did a great job. So we're very fortunate to have that kind of talent, volunteer talent in the community, and we look forward to the next one that they plan on holding 6 months from now, when in theory the metro's open and we can see the impact of what all of the new multimodal transportation that the county's been working on putting in place to accommodate that. I have a piece of what to some might be some very good news. I received a phone call earlier today from the Church of Latter-day Saints, from the group that was interested in purchasing 3 parcels from the community, and they decided to no longer pursue that. So I will be sending a message out to the South Reston residents who are very concerned about that, to let them know the status on that. And let's see, last but not least is we have a forum, an election forum on Monday night right here in this building for our board candidates, 7 o'clock p.m. The ballots also will be going out to members on Monday, March the 3rd. The ballots electronically will open at 5 o'clock, and anybody who attends the forum on Monday evening will have the opportunity to not only listen to the candidates and what their positions are, but also they'll be able to vote on site here that evening. So I encourage all to participate and come to the event. If not, I believe that we will be streaming it live via YouTube.
Thank you, Kate. As someone who's running for re-election, I will see you on the 3rd. And again, echo everyone's comments here about welcome. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I had 2 things. One of them, Ellen, you described, was the Hunter Mill District Summit. I think I saw it billed as by Supervisor Hudgens at the Frying Pan Park Visitor Center. Kicks off at 8, and then the actual meeting starts at 9. Sounded like county priorities, public school issues, so a plethora of information and discussion topics. So it seems like a really a good thing for us all to attend if we can. Second point was February 1st. Got to plug that Freezing for a Reason. It was a great community event. It was a great cause, and I'm glad I survived to tell about it. So, it was, again, so thank you. All right, and with that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is item F, land use update. So I believe it's a discussion item, and John McBride and Russ Forno will be taking us through that.
Good evening, Vice President Siegel and members of the board. I will touch on the traffic update before we proceed on to my name is Russ Forno with Odin Feldman Middleman. Involved tasked me to track land use activity within Reston that's been filed with Fairfax County. For the month of February, I just wanted to highlight a few items. On February 14th, a special exception was filed for a private school of special education in a private residence located in the Longwood Road subdivision. The application is currently in review for quality control before being officially accepted. The next item is, as you all know, the Lake Ann Fellowship House property is under the development. Novus Residences has filed what's called a PRC Development Plan Amendment and a Proper Condition Amendment, and that was on February 5th. And that application also is currently in review for acceptance by the county. The third item, the Lake Ann Village Center across the street, was officially accepted on February 5th, that same day, for now, moving south, below the toll road, Reston Heights has a site plan review, and it was, site plan comments were issued on February 12th for the 440-unit multifamily development. That's part of the Reston Heights plan review. Just as a reminder, the Reston Heights district is a non-transit oriented development district. It's planned for mixed use, which includes mixed residential and retail uses at an approved 2.8 acre. That site, and just outside near Hunter Mill Road, Oakcrest School has appears that the Board of Supervisors is scheduled to make a decision on the proposed special exception on February 25th. Oh, that was just yesterday. Okay. So, and that concludes the activity for about 30 days. Any questions?
Any questions for us? Hearing none. Thanks very much, Russ.
Thank you.
This move to where I can go over there or anywhere? Yeah. You all don't mind if I can.
Have podium will travel.
That's right. Never stay in one place very long is my motto. We have two screens. So if the board can turn this way, you all, it's probably easier for the audience to look at that one over there. I promise you they say the same thing. Or at least I promise for Sabrina they're supposed to say the same thing. I'm John McBride with the firm of Odin, Feldman, Middleman, and I'm here to walk you through the recently approved comprehensive plan amendment that covers the Dulles Corridor, as we call it, the middle section of Reston. By the way, I'm not running for a board, so I'll try to be brief, but this will take a while. I want to give you a feel of what the plan is, what's in it, and when you go look at the plan yourself, kind of a construct of what you're looking at and where to go define what interests you. So the board approved it on February 11th. The adoption is not the end of the story. It's really the beginning. is what is a comprehensive plan? A comprehensive plan is a guide. It's a vision for the built environment of this portion of Reston in the year 2040. It's a guide for future development decisions. That's its importance for the county. It's not legally binding. It's not an ordinance. It's not a law. It's not mandatory. It's merely a guide that talks about the location, character, and extent of the built environment in 2040. Therefore, you won't see a lot of words such as must, require, mandatory, or shall. Again, it's describing a vision. But it's a very important document because it's applied to each of these development applications that Russ just mentioned. Zoning, special exceptions, special permits, development plans, PRC plans, subdivision plans, site plans, and the public capital facility plans. All use this document as a guide. Fairfax is very good. Your county staff, as well as the Board of Supervisors, has a long track record of requiring each of these applications to be in harmony or in conformance with this plan. So that's the importance of this document, even though it's not mandatory. Many of its provisions that we'll see are going to be enforced through proffers, not through zoning regulations or subdivision regulations, but proffers that are voluntarily agreed to by the developer, landowner, and the Board of County Supervisors. That is how you implement this plan, case-by-case basis. So let's get started, and this is a little bit misleading right off the first slide because the Metro train is running. Hopefully, when we do this in a couple months or July, that will hold true. This all started back in 2008, maybe even late 2007. There were decisions made about extending the Silver Line through this area. This area had already been changed from its original government and industry commercial area of Reston. It had been taken out and changed into the number 2 commercial tax base revenue area for the county, second only to Tyson's. So what they did is they looked at the entire Reston area and said, we need to modify and update our comprehensive plan. We'll do it in 2 phases. The red X's are simply areas that were appended that aren't within the covenanted area of Reston, not deemed to be Reston proper. This is not a document from the comprehensive plan. This is an early document of the Reston Master Plan Task Force. RA had a member on it. Andy Siegel was the most recent member. RCA had members on it. Arch had a member on it. It had developers. It had all sorts of other stakeholders and individual residents. The first area they took was Phase 1, which was this corridor. As you can see, it used to be called the Reston-Herndon corridor, suburban center area, which was not good for Reston because it treated it separately from Reston. It wasn't integrated within Reston from a planning perspective. And guess what happened? As it developed, it wasn't totally integrated. So this shows the focus of the 3 metro stations, and quarter-mile around each station and a half-mile around each station are these circles. Now the circles were problematic, and I can't aim very well. That's why I'm not good at tennis. Were problematic because you have areas here. This isn't working.
I don't think you can do it on the TV.
Okay. You have areas that are within a quarter mile and a half mile, which is supposed to be the highest intensity development, that are established neighborhoods or that are private open space that's well established, well thought of in the community, well used. So that was a problem. The good news is, and digressing, this is where you find it. RA may put a link to this. This is the county website. There are county staff that can help you with the comp plan to explain it and focus in on whatever your interest is. The supervisor's office can help with that too, but county staff is available in the planning office. The good news is what happened is in phase 1, what we're talking about is look at those circles. They only deal with the old Reston-Herndon Suburban Center corridor. They don't even show as extending to other stable areas. And we've got language in the plan that talks about that too. So here it is. That's the phase 1 area. The way it's organized is into 3 transit station areas that you see here. The Wheelie, which is the station that hopefully will be operational in June or July. Reston Town Center Station area, that's in phase 2. That's a couple years out as far as metro availability. And then the Herndon Transit Station area. So you'll see the plan is organized along those 3 lines. Now here's the significant difference, not only altering the map. With this plan amendment, the area previously arranged as, or designated as Reston-Herndon Suburban Center will no longer be described as a single suburban center or separate, but it will be transit station areas located within Reston. The important part is this change emphasizes the connection between the TSAs and the larger Reston community. They're brought back into the larger Reston community in terms of this comprehensive plan, which should influence development and make them an integral part of this community and the organizations that currently exist. Now the vision for Reston is an important document here in the front of the plan for you to read. The important part here is it's a strong sense of community through design as well as the provision of a variety of community amenities. That's RA, that's the RTCA. You've got DRB, you've got design review and RTCA, you've got community amenities in both. Several public, quasi-public, nonprofit, and private organizations currently provide park, recreation, and cultural facilities and amenities to the Reston area. These are listed. Reston Association is there, and the RCC. What I'm highlighting for you is the difference between this comprehensive plan chapter and any other area in Fairfax County. It's unique to Reston, and it embraces, what's going on here? There we go. It embraces the community of Reston. Here it says needs generated by the TSA should primarily be met through the integration of urban parks, recreation, and cultural facilities within the mixed-use developments. To supplement these parks and facilities, elements of the larger Reston area's robust park and recreation system may be able to be improved to help meet the needs of future residents and employees. Then it talks about the entities that provide those. Again, integration with the RA's programs. And what all of this means is an integration totally into the fabric of Reston. The new residents, the new developments should be members of RA or the RTC. They are going to be members of the RCC because of the tax district. So what the plan does is it supports Reston going forward and supports the notion that this corridor will be integrated totally within the fabric of Reston and the organizations. Again, talking about the same thing, integration with Reston. Down here talks about Reston Community Center, also talks about Reston Association down at the bottom. Talks about membership in Reston Association in the comprehensive plan. Remember, you can't mandate membership in any private organization. You can only set the vision and the construct so that as applications come through, it's a part of being in harmony with the plan. Same thing, membership in Reston Association may serve to meet a portion of the identified park and recreation needs. They're members of Reston, they're members of the association. Some of their facilities may be outside their property, off-site. If so, they contribute towards upgrading other Reston facilities. It's team, it's community, all is one. Reston is one community, we're all in it together. Again, high caliber in terms of planning, architectural design, compatibility, and livability. You see that elsewhere in the county comprehensive plan. What's different is the next sentence. Redeveloped areas should be designed as integral parts of the larger Reston community. What does that mean? That means the overall Reston community should have input in that design to ensure that it's an integral part of that community. So that's a very important sentence. High standards for architecture and design. Again, the end of that sentence is the important part and what's different in this plan and supports the character of Reston as a whole. Encourage design elements that are complementary to the larger Reston community. Who best to determine that in an application than the Reston community themselves through their organizations. Now, a second main focus, so integration of this into the Reston community and fabric and organizations was a major objective of this board. Second major objective was, remember those circles? To protect surrounding neighborhoods that are close to these metro stops, close to this intense development. There's sections here that deal with that, specifically in the plan. 2 areas that talk about that. So that will be an issue in each application as it comes through, especially overflow parking. A concept of trying to get people to use cars less is to provide less parking spaces in all of this new development. That kind of works and kind of doesn't work. Sometimes you have overflow parking problems in your nearby communities. So we have language in here that raises that issue from the beginning so that the development has to deal with that to be in harmony with this plan. So protection of existing communities, we think, has been addressed by this plan. Next main focus of this board was incorporation of the arts. We think that's been done pretty well in this plan. The important part is the negotiations and individual zonings, but the language is here, and I think you'll see a change as development comes about of having much more public art in these areas. Now the next one is probably one of the main focus is environmental stewardship. And Reston does things differently in that regard than some other areas of the county. The comprehensive plan reflects that. RA itself as an entity is responsible for a lot of the environmental stewardship within Reston. That is specifically in the plan. So again, as development comes through, it will be judged against this. They will be coming to the RA staff so that these same environmental stewardship principles, policies, and practices are implemented within the corridor, which is not subject to your Reston covenants. Integration of nature with developed areas is a central planning principle. Reston plan and manages Reston's natural resources. Have a list of banned and preferred native plantings. Enhance the education program for invasive species. Expand the native trees and wildflowers. Again, all of those are pretty specific and fairly unique to this comprehensive plan language. Now, this is how we're organized. The orange is TOD areas, transit-oriented development. That's the core areas, the highest density of residential, the highest intensity of commercial gross floor area. The other areas are non-TOD areas, so their level of development is less. Getting more specific, you can see the various land uses broken down. As you get to the right, which is the east, a lot of those areas remain pretty much suburban office park areas under the plan, so you won't see redevelopment there. The primary redevelopment and additional square footage you'll see is in the purple, which is the TOD area, which is mixed use, office and residential, high intensity, up to 4.0 FAR. I guess that's brown, is primarily residential mixed use, so it's over 50% residential mixed use. Much of the redevelopment here is going to be in residential units. Pretty much all multifamily, either apartment or condominium. No singles. I doubt there'll be any townhouses. Probably not even any low-rise condominiums. This is not in the comprehensive plan. This is an early working document. You can see because it has those nasty circles that we don't like. But it's a good summary of the intensities here. Because in the plan, you have to read the text to really get an idea of how much gross floor area or number of units is going to be here in a specific location. So here's where you'll see the intensities. It's got DU as dwelling units, and the number range is the floor area ratio range, which is per acre. A 1.0 FAR floor area ratio is 43,000 square feet on an acre, basically, of property. 4.0 is 4 times that. 4.0 is probably about at least 19, 20-story building, sometimes higher. These are the totals. This is back in 2010, the existing land use by land use, and a total of 31,811,000 square feet. It's going to more than double by 2040. To 70,745 million, 70,745,000. You'll see the biggest increases are not in the office, they're in the residential. Going from 5,860 dwellings to almost 28,000 dwellings. That's a lot more people, a lot more members, a lot more Reston community. Restonians. The other big one is in hotels, as far as a projection, tripling. Not much difference in retail. So it's really the residential that's the big one here. That, again, talks about excellence in design, thoughtful design, continue the Reston traditions of emphasizing community gathering places, integrating access to the natural environment when possible, and providing public art. Again, we've got those throughout the document. Bonus density. In addition to the 70 million square feet and the 28,000 people, there's an opportunity if certain things are done to have higher levels. It's called bonus density. Now, there are criteria you have to meet to get that. I think RCA initially had the concern, and RA did also. We pushed, we didn't get exactly what we wanted, but we did get some changes that the supervisor did add in, recognizing that these should be significant infrastructure needs, and these should be substantial contributions towards realizing multimodal crossings of the DAAR before these bonus densities are given. The prior text was like it is throughout the comprehensive plan and other areas of the county, relatively easy to meet for a developer to get bonus density. That has been changed here because of the enormous infrastructure needs in this area. This just breaks the monotony of the text. It emphasizes, believe it or not, it was harder than we would have thought to talk about mature trees every time we talked about tree canopy instead of just tree canopy, because there's a big difference preserving mature trees in an area as opposed to reestablishing tree canopy through new trees. So I think we've been successful throughout the document. There is reference to mature trees. We have streetscape pictures. Here in the streetscape, we talk about a Reston-specific streetscape, wide, thickly planted areas of irregularly spaced trees, applied on multiple blocks. Down at the bottom, the important part, the streetscape provides for additional environmental benefits due to the increased tree canopy accomplished by the increased number and size of trees and reduction in impervious surfaces. Again, more of a clustering, more of a tree save of mature trees in areas that connect to each other, that provide wildlife corridors, as well as a better environment for the trees to survive. Again, preservation of existing trees are encouraged to help connect to the larger fabric of Reston, which has plenty of tree protection and mature tree corridors. Again, we got mature tree canopy and other natural areas there, and it's not just restore, it's enhance, so that we get the private sector assisting and really buying into the concept that that's a good thing. Publicly accessible open space for each parcel can be met by open space on the parcel or in some instances off-site. That was a big issue for RCA as well as RA. And what normally is done in other areas of the county in the plan is you can do monetary contributions in lieu of putting it on site. Well, that's good, but only if the money can actually be used to do something about tree canopy and open space. So we've added this in part where such can be used to either acquire new or to improve existing open space in Reston. So that limits of when you can opt out of providing open space on your site to only those situations where you can make a payment and to actually have something done off-site to mitigate you not providing it. Actually, RTCA and RA are the ones that would have a big say in that and in the implementation of that. So again, this is the way to partner and have one Reston community where these developments provide resources to expand open space and or improve open space anywhere in Reston. Another focus was what I call trails, but it really means multimodal mobility for trails. runners, joggers, pedestrians going to work, going to their homes, bicyclists. All of those are needed in Reston. So it's really not sidewalk as a misnomer. There's great emphasis. I think the county has done a great job in this, in their emphasis. They've got trail networks for the 3 areas, different designations of trails. So again, as applications come in, they're going to be looked to partner on actually getting these built. Now, going from the good news to the bad news, or the news that's concerning, intensity and density generates traffic. Even though you have Metro, generally speaking, even in Roslyn, can only cut down vehicle trips by 15–20% maximum. So you're still going to have a lot more people, a lot more cars. That was a concern, again, of the community, RCA and RA, your board. There are 2 ways the county has in this plan to deal with that from a vision point of view. First one is transportation demand management, where you have these reductions to the normal vehicle trips being provided. There are many ways to do this: carpooling, shuttles, more trails, bicycles in Reston, which seems to be a coming thing that will probably occur partly through the efforts of these developers also. So there are many ways to do it, but 2 things have to happen. The community has to be vigilant so that when each application comes in, you get a specific transportation demand management, or TDM, program proffered that we think would fit Reston and would actually be effective. And the second is, once the development comes in, you have to monitor it and you have to keep up on it. So that's a concern. Congestion, the second way to relieve congestion is having a grid, more of a grid system, which is difficult in Reston because it wasn't set up as a grid initially. But there are a lot of opportunities to greatly relieve congestion. Calls for, I believe it's 5 crossings of the Dulles Toll Road, which is very expensive, and it calls for many other connections through here. All of these are crucial to the existing road network, especially Sunrise Valley and Sunset Hills, and to be able to get from one part of Reston to the other. The mobility within Reston is very important, was a big concern of RCA. We just need to be vigilant on each application as it comes through. I think the vision is there, the tools are there in this plan, but the devil's going to be in the details. Now, how the plan is organized, district recommendations. Again, it'll have text regarding the level of development for each of those 3 transit station areas. The mixed-use area is the most intense. It's supposed to be a walkable, compact, dense community closest to the stations, and then transition out to more residential, slightly less dense, and then the least dense and the less high buildings at the edges, close to the existing neighborhoods. This is an example. Each district will be broken down. This is the Wheelie Station district here. You can see the different designations. This should jump out at you that, look at all the residential. That's going to be a node of multifamily residential surrounding on the outer edges of the higher density mixed use commercial office. Very different than it is today. Thought this was interesting. This is North Reston Town Center. Very different than it is today. With a central green and regular grids. So a good vision. Be happy to answer any questions. That's my favorite part of it. Again, we could go on for hours, but it's better if you bring it up on your computer, look at it yourself, call county staff if you have questions, get familiar with it, because the applications are going to be coming.
Boy, thank you so much, John. Do we have any questions around the table for John?
Madam Master,
Tim?
what do you anticipate the tallest buildings that we will see in the Central Corridor to be?
I don't know, because there's no height limit. Even Tyson's has a height limit, even when you look at that plan. So I'm not sure. I think they're leaving the flexibility open to, as long as the Reston community has a lot of input as to what is quality design and what fits into the fabric of Reston, I suppose you could have a very high building. We're up to what, 23 now that's been approved? I think that's the highest so far. I suspect there are going to be some higher than that to reach these levels of intensity.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
You want this back?
Oh,
We'll need to thank you, John.
yeah. A lot of hard work by a lot of groups coming up with that, so thank you. And thank you for your advice and counsel, John. All right, as we move now to agenda item G, it's a discussion item, Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee, Revised Reston on Foot and Bicycle Report. And that's our chairperson, Mr. Burton Griffith, coming to the podium. Hello, Burton.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and Joe Stowers is also here with me in case I need some help. He knows the history of this very well. He originated the Reston on Foot report more than 10 years ago, I think. And of course now we're calling it Reston on Foot and Bicycle. This report, which I hope you've had at least an opportunity to review quickly, supports Reston's goals of increasing walking and bicycling as transportation modes. It contains information on generally recommended engineering practices that consider the needs of all road users. And as Mike Sanyo pointed out, it contains lists of specific recommendations with costs that are estimated, and those are grouped by district. A version of the list was prioritized, but we don't have priority rankings on the recommendations right now. The idea with that is that any of these could be implemented as the opportunity arises with different development happening in different areas, different amounts of money being available for improvements different years. You know, it could be better to tackle things depending on what else is happening development-wise and budget-wise. So the lists are not prioritized. And how this document could be used, as I just mentioned, when opportunities for proffers, et cetera, become available. There's guidelines in here on the preferred engineering practices. Some people have thought that this document could be used to promote Reston, you know, hand it out and show people this is what we like and this is what we're working on. And also to inform Reston residents of areas that the board is already aware of as needing an improvement. For example, when I was interested in joining the Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee, I was interested in a certain pathway getting put in on the west side of Wheelie, south of Barron Cameron, between Cameron and North Shore, and now that's going in. So, and it was already in the works before I joined the committee. So if there's anyone out there that wants to research, get online and see what is already known, then that would be a good source of information for them. Joe Stowers and Nicole Winans did most of the work on this version, and most of the information in the tables we compiled in 2012 and 2013. Then we added in the additional language afterwards. The RA communications staff produced something very close to the final version of this late last year, and our committee checked it over and went through the list of recommendations again to validate that they were still current. And then the RA staff made some revisions that we requested. And that's all I had to say about the plan. Joe, did you have anything you wanted to say?
We started working on this after I had chaired the Planning and Zoning Committee for 17 years. And during that long period of time, we were looking almost every proposal that developers came along with on a piece-by-piece basis, trying to get things connected. And of course, it was always difficult to get a developer to do something beyond the property he dealt with. And so we ended up with a lot of gaps. And we found over the process of putting this report together in the early 90s and then updating it 3 times before, this is the 5th total version that's been put together, that there are more than 10 miles worth of missing gaps in our pedestrian system, even though it's a very complete one. And there are about 80, more than 80 intersections that have problems for pedestrians and bicyclists because of the lack of crosswalks, but because of the lack of signals and other things. There's a lot of other things in here, like curb cuts that are needed, bus stops that need improvement, and so on. But the philosophy was to put together a whole plan and to have that concept adopted by the board. Andy, you mentioned that this is just a discussion item. I think we had hoped that we would get endorsement of the document.
Right, so that it represents something that the board wants, puts it on the website as this is what Reston Association plans to do.
Yeah, and that's been done for each of these previous 4 occasions. Now, that doesn't mean that every priority or everything that's in here is exactly what you are acting on, but at least in principle, you think it's well put together and something that RA can stand behind. And if you do, then it makes it easier for us when we're talking with developers or anything to say, it's in here, and the board's adopted that. You ought to consider it. And that's been very helpful over the years. It's been more than 10 years. It's been more than 25 years, really, that we've been working on it. And it's been very helpful. It's very well respected by VDOT, by the county, and other park authority organizations, and so on. So with your endorsement, we will work together with you to try to implement as much as we can.
One, I would just say, based upon the former agenda item where we learned, and got a great discussion of some of the upcoming developments and proffers and other things, that we have a document like this that we certainly can show a developer to say, when the question becomes, well, what do you need? Obviously, this is a great definition of all that. And, just want to first say, as I read through it, it was a fantastic document and a great way to represent the needs of our community. So thank you for your team for putting it, or revising it for this fifth edition.
Yeah, and I would say, I think this has been more thoroughly reviewed by Brian Murphy and by the team, because many of the team in the committee are relatively new, so they've looked it over pretty carefully, and I think it's in better shape perhaps than any others. On the other hand, a lot of things are happening. Lake Ann's getting redeveloped, the town center and the other station areas are changing. We've tried to work very carefully with that through the whole process, but things are going to change, and we're going to have to, I think, at least I would certainly advise the committee to think about perhaps updating this again in the relatively near future rather than waiting for 6 or 8 years like we have before.
Do we have any questions for Burton or Joe?
I do, Burton and Joe, the dedicated bike lane on Soapstone, is that dedicated, is the purpose is that to connect with the Silver Line, encourage people to bike to the Silver Line?
Yes, we recommended, and one of the two committees I'm on, either the TAC or the PBAC, I forget which, maybe both of them, that extension be made. It came out of the 2008 RMAG report that I'm sure you're familiar with, that recommended that an extension of the Soapstone, with a whole multimodal Soapstone facility to cross with bus service and probably, you know, all types of vehicles, including pedestrian bike, to cross over the toll road and connect with the stations on that side, particularly the Wheelie Station. And it's one of, I think it's 4 crossings that are recommended in the plan that John McBride presented. And
was that your question about the crossing, or was it the bike lanes along Soapstone?
Yeah.
Okay, as far as the other bike lanes that are
she
already
asked
in.
about it in connection with the station, yeah.
Okay.
Talking about the Soapstone dedicated bike lane.
Right, that are already
Yeah.
in there.
Mm-hmm.
The VDOT, I think their standard practice now is when they are about to repave a road, they consider a road for what they call a road diet. And that's what this was.
Oh, good.
So they put in the center lane, they reduced the travel lanes to 1 on each side, and then there was room for the bike lanes. So it wasn't something that we really had to push for. They did that. I'm sure that Fairfax Advocates for Better Bicycling very much supported that, but we didn't push for that. It just happened without us.
It's a gift.
But
Yeah.
there
Right.
are you know, the county's in the process of adopting a countywide bike plan, and it includes and our committee has been very supportive of what they recommend. They're recommending additional road diet type of lanes be added in a few locations where the traffic can hold it with fewer lanes. They also are recommending something we don't have, which is shared bike lanes, shared lanes, shared with motor vehicles, and separate bike paths in many cases.
Just one quick comment on there. And Ellen, I know during the task force meetings, we did talk a lot about the interconnection into the stations, and the county did put up on their website a set of projects, whether it's repaving pathways, et cetera, you know, connecting to the Soapstone bike lanes into the pathway system that gets you over towards Wheelie. And there's a whole list. On the website, there's a list of projects going out. I think it was about to 2017 where those projects were going. So those are.
Incidentally, one thing that most people don't know about in Reston is part of the implementation of one of the first ones that was put on the comprehensive plan for a new crossing at Town Center Parkway. In phase 2 of the Silver Line construction, they will go ahead. They're actually working on the design of it now, of a bridge that will be over the rail, where the rail will pass over that new underpass. Will go to the other side of the highway. So that's the first thing that's being implemented. It's in the comprehensive plan, and it will provide much improved station access from both sides of the highway.
Eve, I see you have a question?
Yeah, I was curious, so you're recommending a bike lane on Wheelie?
Yes, and yeah, does that seem crazy to you?
Yeah, but, I mean,
Yeah, right.
only because, I mean, I live there, I travel that
Right, yeah.
frequently, and.
Yeah, Wheelie right now is not a pleasant place to bicycle through those wine. It's like it's a fun place to drive and pretend that you're a race car driver, but it's not fun to compete with that on a bike. The path along Wheelie is rideable, but it's often covered with debris, and then bicyclists are in conflict with pedestrians.
I think of that path, I would love to see that path be much wider so that it was, because I look at Lynx as being, within a mile of the new metro, but not walkable. Just because of the narrowness of the path and the condition
I think
of
for bike lanes to be on Wheelie now, they would have to make some major changes to the road. That you can't squeeze a bike lane in there right now. They would have to redo a lot of the road surface. But the bike lane recommendations that we have are, we check those with the countywide bike plan, which the board has approved. Well, hasn't approved. It's not up to you to approve, but you endorsed. And so we tried to incorporate all of those things that were interested into this so that they're consistent with each other.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Wheelie improved to the point where you could walk, drive, and bike on
But
it.
it's definitely not as simple as
hard to imagine
painting
it,
a
but
bike lane on there.
To even implement, go on a little bit more about the details on that. When we had the Wheelie Avenue path put in, we did it on the cheap because we were going around begging for money from property owners and all that. And the problem is, for most of that distance, you need to build retaining walls that are very expensive, and it would be many, many, many times more difficult. So that's going to take a lot of. That's something frankly, that RA or the community really hasn't asked the county or anybody else to do, and I think it would be great if we could.
I'm going to ask Director Cohn to wrap it up for us. So does anyone have any questions before we get to Director Cohn? Okay, we have Director
Very, very quick comment. I know that Virginia State has changed the funding model for roads.
Right.
There's discussion about criteria for prioritizing both roads and non-road transportation options. I think it's something that we should watch very, very closely. Well, I've got the floor. Really support the work that you're doing, Burton. I did walk down Wheelie. I actually walked faster than most of the cars. I was tracking. It was hard to believe, and I was not running. You can be sure I don't run. But I am sure that if there were improvements on that, you would get a lot more pedestrian bicycle traffic to the metro stop. I see that as a key artery. I'd be really concerned if VDOT decided that they needed to widen Wheelie, because what I would see is just more of the same. And so I think being creative about maintaining the space and making it safe for commuters on bicycles, pedestrians, and otherwise.
And the good news is that the legislation that was passed last year makes a lot of money available, and the important mechanism is going to be the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, which was created a long time ago, but there was no money. Now there's money.
And so that plan plus that change is something we should.
A big hunk of the money from that legislation goes to the region, and then the Northern Virginia region, that the agency will be divvying it up, and we do have representatives on that from the county.
Excellent.
Okay, any last questions before I turn it over to Director Cohn? Probably aren't going to take anything from the audience at the moment, so.
Joe, can I add something? Comments might be helpful?
Sure.
Just information from the group.
Probably at this stage, we probably should cut it off. That's okay, Rachel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'd just like,
And to
may I start? Yeah.
Yep.
Just like to make a short statement and then propose a motion. First thing is I just want kudos to the committee. I'm the liaison to this committee. I've very much enjoyed watching and the care and diligence that goes into figuring out all the details on how you make our road system and path system actually bike and pedestrian friendly. It's much more difficult than you might imagine if you think about all the different things that go into crosswalks and designs and making it safe, and they've done a wonderful job. And I also want to say they've been open. We've had citizens from Reston who had particular sections of path they weren't comfortable with come in. Last month someone came in with a specific thing that was needed to be adjusted. It's now in the report, I think.
Stewart Road, yes.
So, you know, if you have particular path or problems, you should bring them up to this committee because it's very responsive. In light of all this, I would like to make a motion and move to adopt the Reston on Foot and Bicycle Report as revised by the Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Steve seconded.
All right. Any discussion on the motion before I call the question? Then I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as read by Director Cohn, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Abstaining? Motion passes. Thank you, Director Cohn. Thank you, Burton. Oh.
Is there another agenda item that I'm up for next?
But if you can remain here, but we've got several things that happened before that.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I'll still be here.
Thank you very much, Burton. Excellent job.
Can we rearrange?
No.
No?
But thank you for the suggestion.
Okay.
All right, we're going to move on to item H, which is snow removal from sidewalks and pathways adjacent to RA property. We obviously had a bit of snow over the last months. We've had more snow this winter than we've had in the last couple. So what we're going to do for this section is I'm going to ask Kate to kick it off. Then we're going to ask Larry to come up to the podium and describe a little bit about some of the situations of staff and what's going on. Then our counsel, Ken Shadrick, is going to talk a little bit about our legal obligations and the kind of the environment that we have to work within. And then we'll go back to Kate to help us wrap it up. And at that stage, Burton will probably talk a little bit about the letter at that stage. So if that's okay, I think that helps formulate kind of what we're doing and the structure of what we're going to do. With that, I hand it over to our CEO, Kate Fulkerson.
Great. Well, obviously, we've received lots of concern and calls over the last snowfall that we had about accessibility, which is very important to the staff here. We take very seriously clearing our pathways to make them accessible for people moving from one part of the community to another, whether that's just down the street or, as Director Sanyo did, all the way to work from North Reston. And so we were listening closely to that, and we decided that it was important to look at the matters very closely and what we can do as a community in two different ways. We know that the supervisor put forth a motion earlier this week to hold a forum with the county agencies to see what they can do, but we also felt that Reston Association could do something on two fronts in working with the county, as well as what we can do to encourage residents to help in the process. I would like to turn the floor over to Larry, who's worked very closely with Brian Murphy in identifying different areas of interest that we would like to impact going forward.
I'll grab my cheat sheet here.
Welcome, Larry.
Good evening. Traveling mic, right? All right, let's see if I can pull up this first graphic. What I want to do, first I want to give kudos to Brian and our staff for the job they always do with the snow plowing. And I think it's important for everybody to know that for the first time in 40 years, Brian stayed home. Some of you heard me say this, but he's always, every snowstorm for the last 40 years, he's been command central, and Mike McNamara from the CSF staff said, Brian, go home, I'll take care of it. I don't think Brian slept all night. He was still watching the snowfall and all that good stuff, but kudos to him for, doing that. So with all the member comments that we have gotten with the recent snowfalls, and I think we may get some more on, Monday into Tuesday, I heard, something like that. We may come up again. Most of those comments we get are very favorable for plowing our 55 miles of pathways and then the associated steps and things like that. But what I want to do, and as the title of this agenda item states, I want to talk about the pathways or sidewalks primarily. Let's see if I get the right one up here. Let's go right here. And I want to thank Brian for putting these together. A little tough to see. It's actually a large PDF, but what this graphic shows is our pathways in black. And what I want to point out is you hear the discussion, let me get by the mic, with snowfall about people should take care of the sidewalks adjacent to their properties. Fairfax County doesn't have an ordinance. Many localities do have that ordinance, and even though they have a very difficult time going out and actually finding the homeowners because they didn't clear the sidewalk, a lot of localities do have that, but Fairfax County does not. So what I want to do is give a little perspective of what Reston Association would have to do if, in fact, we had that ordinance. And what we're often asked to do, even though currently we do not do that, we do our pathways, and where they come up to a road and there might be sidewalks that ties into, we focus on the pathways. So, again, I'm going to step away from the mic. It's hard to see, but you can see in the red, those are the adjacent sidewalks that are adjacent to the RA property. So to give you a little perspective, and again, Brian put together a little cheat sheet for me here. If you add them, this is just North Reston right here. We can, for those of you who are interested in South Reston, let's see if we can move this down. I'm not real good with the laptops, but just give you another little perspective there. So throughout Reston, those adjacent sidewalks to RA property, okay, and so I'm not talking about sidewalks adjacent to clusters, condominiums, apartments, commercial, anything. This is just those adjacent to our properties. It totals about 5.6 miles. And Brian has also broken this down. I'm not going to read this, but we have it broken down by those rings around the schools. And Brian, those are half mile radius around each of the schools. So it gives you an idea that if we were to do that, adjacent to all our properties, we're talking about 5.6 additional miles of clearing, primarily on sidewalks, which are in the VDOT right-of-way almost exclusively. And while most of those sidewalks are owned by the Highway Department, some of them are actually owned by Fairfax County. Sort of an odd mix on how ownership of sidewalks comes about. It has to do, I think, with when they were built and what the negotiations were at the time. But I think this gives a little bit of a context, and I don't have a metric on how many miles of sidewalk total are in Reston. So when we hear from the members about, well, we got to clear, everybody that lives next to a sidewalk should clear it, we're talking about miles and miles and miles of sidewalks. And, if you look at Reston Association's property, which is, scattered all around in 300 plus individual parcels, and that represents 5.6 miles. You can imagine the number of miles of sidewalks in total. So I just want to give a little perspective on that. And then the next graphic I want to show here, if I can get this done up here. Let's see. Whoa. Let's blow that up. Get that up. See, I'm not real good with these laptops. Let's double. Now I can get. I just got to expand it here.
Yep, right up.
Dang it. Do we get it? Go right up there. Well, the problem is you can't see it too much. We'll try 50%. I'll try to zoom in. I'll have to move it a little bit. Let's see what that does. All right. So we'll start with North Reston here. These are Fairfax County Department of Public Works owned sidewalks pathways. And one of the things that we have done in response to the recent discussions, I have talked to a representative from Public Works about the possibility of Reston Association plowing certain portions of the county pathways, not sidewalks, but pathways that would be important for connectivity to future Metro, or in the one case in South Reston, to the park and ride lot. So I think Kate may have put in Dropbox just a skeleton proposal that we're going to be sending to them just for their consideration. In the past, this has been sort of frowned upon. We've never gotten a green light from the county to basically stay off our infrastructure. We're going to try that again because we do think there are some sections. Now you'll notice here, this is Wheelie Avenue. A lot of talk about Wheelie Avenue tonight, Mike's experience and discussion about the road. A good bit of that is owned by Fairfax County. And just a little historical reference to your point, Eve, the pathway along Wheelie Avenue used to be 8 feet.
Yes.
The county came in and cut it down, in part because the asphalt was butted right up against the curb, and people felt it was more important to have that sort of perceptive and, to some degree, physical safety barrier, a little bit of grass. And the other thing is that the edge of the asphalt where it butted up to the curb, because of the differential freeze-thaw, was always crumbling. So it used to be wider.
Now it's weedy.
Now it's less wide. So there's coming down, when we get down into South Reston, so the highlights in yellow are what we're approaching Fairfax County with about permitting us to plow with an agreement, subject to council's review, of course, to get in and plow these connections. And the other big ones here, as I mentioned, this is, for those who are familiar with the asphalt walkway on Sunrise Valley Drive, which will be a major feeder route to Metro. This is Wheelie right there. And then the county trail that was put in a number of years ago that connects to our system and goes up to the park and ride lot at Lawyers and Fox Mill. So that's something we're going to try to do in the very near term. Brian has tried to make contact with VDOT because they actually have some facilities too that may come into play. We haven't gotten very far with them yet.
Are those paved trails?
These are paved. These are asphalt.
And what is their liability for not doing it? I mean,
Zero. Sovereign immunity.
Really?
We're going to have Ken talk about the liabilities in just a little bit.
So, again, what I want to do with these two graphs is just kind of give you a perspective of what the scope would be to Reston Association if we were to come in and let's do all the stuff next to our property. But in this case, these are the asphalt pathways that currently exist that we think would be of real benefit to the community, and particularly after Metro opens. Hopefully it's not going to open in the winter when there is snow. We'll get a little bit of riding before that. And, just again, get a little perspective. So, anybody have any
Larry,
questions?
Are those pathways wide enough for us to plow?
Yes.
so you can use a front loader and a little.
We use our bombardiers.
The bombardiers?
The Ken Knieven Memorial or designated bombardier that he's always wanted to drive.
Would there be some kind of a financial transaction?
No, we're not asking for one at this point. Our initial consideration is to just give us the permission to do this. And the amount of time, Brian, what is the mileage on, it's like mile and a half, 2 miles? Yeah, so let's just say it's roughly 2 miles for this. And we have 4 bombardiers that are out. And so the added effort to do this is not that great. But we think there's high value to it.
What about so I actually, around like in elementary school, what I did was, because so much of the sidewalk there is actually in front of JBG property, I contacted their PR firm and said, gee, that would be really swell if no kids fell on the sidewalk today. And I got a call like, I don't know, about 2 hours later, said, done. And but I find it just crazy that people aren't responsible for their property. I mean,
And we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a minute too.
Yeah, one other point I want to make is we're out plowing our pathways well in advance of the roads being cleared. And in the larger snowfalls, like the one we recently had, we have a major battle with VDOT, and we typically lose because they have much larger equipment. So we will plow, a 5 or 6 foot swath on a 8 foot walkway that's adjacent to the road. And even if it's 5 feet away from the road and still in or partially in the right of way, you get a plow truck coming through at 20, 30 miles an hour, chucking snow, and it covers it up. So it's a constant battle.
So Larry, why would we then want to take on the county sidewalk alongside of Sunrise, knowing that it's going to happen?
Actually,
I mean, in a major snowstorm.
In a major storm. Well, there's actually parts of that walkway that are not as close to the road. There are parts that are, but it does a little meandering. But we think, the fact that we get out there early enough will help. I mean, it's still better than not doing it at all.
So it may not be one pass, it may be a couple of.
In those larger storms, we make multiple passes,
Yeah.
just
But
to
I'm
be able
saying
to
on
maintain
the
sight lines on the pathways.
Mike?
So we're only talking about snow, we're not talking about weeding and cutting lawns or anything like that. That would be a different.
No other maintenance, no replacement, no repair, just simply plowing.
But really just making sure people can get to work and school.
And you would recommend that we just narrow it to that issue, not to the
That's,
broader.
the again, skeleton proposal you have in, I think in Dropbox, speaks just to that.
I distracted myself about Lake Ann. So what would we do around Lake Ann? Or would it just still be like, let's convince owners to clear sidewalks? Because those are sidewalks.
Right now, we don't have a current proposal to do anything else around Lake Ann other than the paths we currently plow.
Right.
Right, and then,
Well, I mean, the big owners there, I mean, I think.
well, and I think.
Kate's going to talk about that
Yeah,
in a couple minutes.
we've got some ideas on that, but I wanted to give Ken the opportunity for this piece of it to talk about what this meant to us legally.
So let's wrap up again with Larry. Everyone kind of understand what Larry and staff are proposing. That was kind of our idea. Then we're going to ask Mr. Chadwick to help us understand the legal aspects of it, and then we'll go back to Kate with just some wrap-up ideas, and then we have some motions that we can go through that discuss these things. So, anything more for Larry? All right.
He did provide a copy of that is part of your, in your Dropbox. You'll be able to see that map that he gave there
Put
too.
the additional materials.
Yeah, yes, we put them in later this afternoon. We want to make sure you had that. Ken?
I'm going to earn my nickname very well tonight as the Bad Ken.
Oh.
Bad Ken.
Because I'm the one that has the responsibility to advise my client resident association what the parameters are with what can and can't be done. And what the exposure is to liability with regard to what can and can't be done. First of all, remember that Virginia is a very strong private property state. And you cannot do anything on somebody else's property generally without permission. Second of all, going on somebody else's property to do something on their property can create a legal liability for whatever it is that you did on their property to you. So going on somebody else's property, whether it's VDOT, whether it's Fairfax County, whatever, automatically puts you at risk. And also, as has been evidenced in a number of other cases, puts the underlying landowner at risk. So if we're going to do anything to begin with, we need to make sure that we have permission to go on and do that which we want to do on the other property owner's property. The other reason that that's important, especially in terms of having an obligation to perform, as Larry pointed out, Fairfax County does not have an obligation to perform snow removal on adjacent sidewalks. So there is no obligation like there is in Alexandria or some other jurisdictions. And it's not a whole lot of jurisdictions that have this, but there are some jurisdictions that have the requirement that adjacent property owners go and clear the sidewalks that are around their property. Fairfax doesn't have that, and as you can go on their website and find that they say, we encourage it, but there's no obligation. So if there's no obligation, the other thing that needs to be accounted for is, well, if I'm going to do it, what are my risks?
and what mitigation against those risks do I have? Insurance is your risk protector. That's why you carry it in all sorts of different forms and under all sorts of different policies. Unfortunately, and as Larry has talked with your insurance agent directly, your insurance will not cover you for property that you don't own or are not responsible in some way for maintaining, repairing, or replacing. The only way that that insurance will be extended is to the extent that you have an obligation, a legal responsibility to do it, which would mean undertaking additional responsibilities by agreement with VDOT or Fairfax County. And I would also remind the board, because it has also been brought up by Mike Sanyo, it will also add to the bottom line expenses that you all are going to be paying for as well, as an association. So there are lots of different responsibilities and things and issues to think about when you're thinking about doing this on somebody else's property. There's liability, there's what undertaking that obligation on that person's property or without authority. There's what happens if we do get the authority and we do something on their property. Are we going to be protected? Making sure the insurance is there to protect the association, its employees, and the board of directors is important, and making sure that we have the money and the insurance coverage to provide for all of that.
Bad Ken.
Bad Ken.
If we get permission though, couldn't we be indemnified? I mean.
Fairfax will not indemnify. The question was raised, I think, by Mike about getting compensation for it. I doubt it very seriously, is the nicest way I can put it. So the reality is you're either going to have to undertake this obligation because you think it's your civic duty and responsibility to do that on behalf of all your members, but before you do that, my recommendation is to make sure, A, that you get something in writing saying that we can do it and they'll allow us to do it, and B, that we make sure that the insurance will cover us.
So if I'm sorry.
Plus, we would need the equipment.
Well, we have the equipment.
Say it again, Richard.
We would need the equipment. We can't take a bomb on a 4-foot sidewalk.
Not sidewalks, trails. I mean,
Didn't I hear Larry say that everywhere that you were recommended, the bombardier would
Right.
work?
But we're talking about all the other.
No.
Yeah, well, no, I split them in two. The current request that I'm, want to discuss with the county is for those asphalt pathways that are highlighted on that graphic. The other one was just to give you an idea of the scope or the magnitude of what we would do if, in fact, we were to go out and do all of the adjacent sidewalks next to our property. And that is not what I'm currently proposing.
Right. But even those walkways, those sidewalks, are not necessarily wide enough.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay, some of those are shovelable.
Yes.
Well, not
Okay.
shovels. We have snow blowers.
Right.
Plus, the bombs do have a 4-foot blade that we have. We have one 4-foot blade that would work on some of the sidewalks, as long as they don't tighten up too much for us. There's a lot of possibilities.
But what we're interested in doing, and what we put in Dropbox for you tonight, and Andy has a motion to this effect, and whether you want to take this motion with the others in total is entirely up to you. But we would like to get permission to continue to pursue our conversations with Fairfax County about the highlighted items that Larry showed you. It made sense to us to make the connections and just let us give it a try and talk with the county and see if they'll allow us to do that. And Ken, of course, will work with Larry to see if we can get any agreement, written agreement that he requires in place.
Since that's an operational issue that theoretically falls under the purview of the CEO, and since there's no action for us to take specifically to approve an agreement, okay, why would we need a motion to allow Larry and staff to have a vigorous discussion with the county at this point?
Well, it may not be vigorous discussion that you're really voting on as much as ultimately, if that vigorous discussion leads to something, the obligations to pay for that which, coming out of the budget, with that kind of money to do the additional work.
Well, I'm assuming though, if you got far enough to the point where the county was saying, great idea, go for it, that you would come back to us with a fiscal impact and what is necessary to do this in the future. And with global warming, we're not gonna have any more snow anyway, so.
Seems like
I
it
think
would be
Mike had his hand up. Can I go to Mike next?
Has PBAC weighed in at all in this issue?
And that's kind of the next point I was gonna
Okay.
bring up separately, because that's Reston Association just doing adjacent to our property. The other issue is, all of the other areas, the residential cluster areas, that are not necessarily well taken up and around the schools, and just as Eve indicated, and coming up with a mobilization plan as well, working with the Communications Advisory Committee, the Transportation Advisory Committee, the Reston Neighborhood Advisory Committee, and the PBAC to come up with a plan of how we communicate the importance of accessibility within and throughout the community. And getting volunteers to take up the effort, just as we had done several years ago.
Yeah, but
Okay,
just-
so one at a time. So let me just say, Mike was next, and I did hear, and are you finished, Mike? Is that what?
Yes,
Okay,
that's
and then Eve, I thought I saw your hand, then we'll go right to Richard, okay?
So, maybe it's just the, okay, well, the clusters, they can have rules about this, right? Like that a cluster has to, you have to clear the sidewalk in front of your house. I mean, the condo, for God's sakes, some years we rent a tiny little backhoe to keep that space clear.
A couple of things.
Trip and fall.
First of all, it's going to be dependent upon your documents and where the trail/sidewalk in those communities are. If it's on common area or common element, then the association might have that obligation.
Right.
The individual unit owner would not have any obligation necessarily, unless it was specifically in your documents. The other thing to remember in all of this is that another entity is the underlying property owner.
Right.
And if it's any sort of municipal entity,
Right.
then they have sovereign immunity.
Yes.
And as seen in another case in Fairfax, where the county actually had the obligation for maintenance, repair, replacement of the infrastructure on the property, both they and the underlying property owner in this case, the association, were sued. Fairfax County played their trump card, I'm out of here, and the association was left holding the bag for everything, ended up having to take all the money out of their umbrella insurance. So realize that we're not talking necessarily about something that is minimal in risk, but making sure that we have insurance that will cover it is very important.
Richard.
And just to clarify, on the Snowpocalypse, Snowmageddon Big Dig effort that went on, okay, to Ken's point, we got permission. This was isolated to Fairfax County Public School property. We had the permission of FCPS to do that, and it was volunteers doing it, clearing snow. That was the school's responsibility to clear, but they got overwhelmed. So we used a pyramid to notify people and to pull out volunteers, and we dug people out. We dug pathways out or sidewalks out. That was what we did, but it was with school board cooperation. It was with South Lakes High School principal. Thank you, Mr. Butler. Okay, and several PTSAs involved as well.
I think it was that was a great community coming together. So I think we've talked about, there's certainly RA plowing our own pathways. We've talked about that. That's ongoing. We've talked about now the possibility of working with the county about another proposal that Larry and Kate have had. We're talking also now about, and Richard, you brought us to kind of a third leg, which was a call to action step. And I don't know, Kate, are you going to talk any more about that?
And then, well, we can call to action, that was the mobilization plan, is how do we come up with something to encourage people when the time comes to get out and do the right thing? And that's just having the conversation with our committees who are familiar with how best to do that.
But keep in mind, okay, because I think we lose sight of the fact that all this discussion about shoveling the walkway in front of you and clusters' responsibility, very few cluster homeowners face a VDOT street. The cluster's common area may abut VDOT right away, but very few homes abut. So I go out and I shovel the walkway in front of my house, and because I am on a corner lot that has a VDOT road, I shovel my walkway along the VDOT road. It then gets plowed over, but that's just like everybody else, okay? But, you know, if you drive Ridge Heights and you drive South Lakes, on South Lakes, there are 3 private homes, 3, maybe 4, but 3 private homes that I know of that actually face or front Sunrise or South Lakes. In Ridge Heights, there are none that I can think of. Kathleen, I don't know whether you can think of any, but I don't think that there are any homes. There are clusters, and there are clusters common areas. So what you would be doing is mobilizing the cluster. And oh, by the way, the majority of clusters in Reston the clusters do not shovel. There is no shoveling done by a cluster.
That's my point, is I think that we want to encourage people to make sure that they have a walkable community, even if it's a small community. And that I think is a concern. Even my own cluster, you know, if you've got people who talk to each other, they're shoveling and making sure, you know, Jane next door can get to the mailbox. But if you go just a few more houses up, it's clear that you got a whole row of houses that don't talk to each other, and they don't care whether they can get to the mailbox.
I think it's
so
a
it's
great,
just
I think
it's
it's
just a conversation to help with, you know, on that. Now, separately from this, in addition to what we've talked about on the trails, the county trails, you know, what we can encourage our residential clusters to do and condos, we also have before us something that the PBAC asked us to consider, and Burton has stayed to talk about what they've put together, as well as John Bowman made a comment about what he saw in the letter. So I wanted to give Burton the opportunity to come back up and talk about the other trail.
Thank you for your patience, Burton, but I hope you see why I wanted to have you come in after we kind of the framework around snow and snow removal. So now tell us where you'd like to see some snow removed.
Well, I mean, I want it removed everywhere, but you know, the WNOD is very important. Called it in the opening paragraph the backbone of the transportation network that connects Reston to other destinations in the region if you're a cyclist. So, and John Good's still here, and I don't disagree with his recommendation that you actually encourage the NVRPA to clear the whole trail. I just thought that maybe the board would prefer to make a recommendation just focused on Reston, but you know, I'm all for personally them clearing the whole trail because I use a lot of the trail too. Let's see, and I had one other thing I wanted to bring up about here. Just for your awareness, the language that we had approved by our committee in that letter was before the NVRPA went out last week with their snow blower and cleared portions of the trail. I think they started hearing from multiple people that, you know, we really need the trail cleared, and they actually did something about it. But I think that having an actual policy instead of just relying on them deciding for themselves when it's lasted long enough that something needs to be done, I'd like to see an actual policy where they commit to doing it so that someone who's wanting to cycle as their means of transportation can know that they can count on being able to use the WNOD year-round instead of being unsure of that. And we, in our letter, we have a request for de-icing. To me, that is not as important as just clearing. The RA doesn't de-ice its trails that I know of, and it's not really that crucial that that be done. Some parts of the WNOD, and I defer to the EAC on this, but some parts of the WNOD, particularly between Reston and Vienna, goes through probably environmentally sensitive areas near rivers, creeks. But the real thing is just the clearing. And that's because, especially during the winter, a lot of the WNOD stays in the shade all day long. And it can snow, we can get 2 inches of accumulation, and on a regular road surface, it's not a big deal. You don't notice it. It's gone after 1 day. But on the WNOD, it'll stay there. If we're going up above, if we're hovering around the freezing mark for a couple weeks, the snow will just stay there, stay there, stay there. So, a couple inches of snow can knock you out of being able to bicycle the WNOD for weeks at a time. And I would also like to thank our committee member Dan Cole for compiling all the data in the letter that supports the general point that we're trying to make. Thank you.
Any questions for Burton before? Okay, thank you very much, Burton. We've got 3 motions related to this, and I know there's varying opinions on this. I guess my recommendation would be that I read the motions, see if I get a second. If so, we can discuss it and any more, and then vote and sort of walk through all 3, unless I'd be open to other ideas or opinions before we march down that path. Or Kate, if there's anything you want to wrap us up on. Any other opinions besides that, or are everyone okay with me just going through that? Then we're going to do it. All right. A motion before us. I move to authorize staff and legal counsel to move forward in its discussions with the Fairfax County to develop and enter into an agreement by which the Reston Association can plow certain portions of Fairfax County-owned pathways in Reston. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we've got a second. Let's have a comment. It sounds like Director.
I was only going to second for the purpose of asking our counsel for his opinion on this again. I know you spoke to this a moment ago, but I just want to be clear. On this motion.
About the motion?
Yes.
About having a motion? I think having a motion is fine. I don't think it's going to be a problem going forward. I think it's appropriate to have a motion.
So I'm, just to read it one more time, again, what I'm reading here is that we're just authorizing staff and legal counsel to have the discussion with Fairfax County at this stage. And Richard, your point.
So my question was, this is not making a commitment. This is going to come back to us if something materializes.
It sounds, that's the way I read this motion.
Okay, I mean, my position is what I said before. I don't understand why we need the motion.
Yeah,
I'm not opposed to the discussion.
Richard's point, I plan to vote against the motion as a matter of principle. I'm glad we spent the time we did hearing the issues, just because I didn't know all that much about it. But formalizing this into a motion to authorize staff to do what they would normally do anyhow, with no consequence to it, I think sets a very bad precedent. I don't want to go down that
really,
road.
if we go back to the high level of what this board is supposed to be doing in terms of, the priorities in terms of setting responsibility and getting out of the weeds on some of this stuff. This is exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to get out of.
Okay.
It's exactly the kind of thing that that the board and the staff are supposed to be establishing a relationship that they trust each other to do the things that they're supposed to do.
Nope.
Okay, and so
Point well taken. Point well taken from Director Chu and Director Higgins. I know that Eve will go to you next after Ken Chadwick has a few words.
The only response I would give to the point that John and Richard have made is that if the board thought that this was problematic from a monetary standpoint, that the reality is you should nip it in the bud and say we're not interested in doing it. If there's any interest in doing it, then staff, I think, needs to know that from the board's position, because staff in and of itself doesn't make the monetary decisions. If the decision is that you don't want to go forward because you don't want to spend the money, they ought to know that now.
Well, you're talking about spending staff resource time? Okay, because we don't know, I mean, to be on all honesty, okay, that motion doesn't, and the background on that motion provides no financial impact statement, okay? And I said before, and the reason I said we're not making a commitment, okay, is that if you come back to us with a proposal in terms of doing this in the future, if there is no financial impact in that background or in that proposal, I sure am hell of gonna object.
Okay, Eve?
I think there's two things. One is, I do agree that I would hate to see staff have spent an inordinate amount of time and energy on something that the board then turned around and said, what the hell did you do that for? That would, so like a little bit of, but the other thing is that there has been a tremendous amount of community uproar on this issue, and I do think it is important for the community to be able to see in a substantial way that they have been heard and that their concerns are, at least at some level, we are attempting to address them. I think that is really probably the more important of the two issues, is that the community needs to know that we hear them. So
I was going to say one other thing that staff brought this motion to us to consider as well, not one of us bringing it to staff.
Right.
So in terms of meddling in the duties of day-to-day operations, it was, I think, staff's brought it to us to consider, and so that's flip-flop that a little bit in my mind. So, other comments on this one? Otherwise, we're going to call the question in a moment. We've read the motion. Other comments? Okay, then I'd like to call the question. For the motion as read, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? So what was that?
No, close.
No, three.
Three, yeah.
John, Alan, and Richard were against.
Close?
Did it pass?
I guess it was a very close one, but it passed.
Right.
All right. We go to our second one. Move to direct the Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee, Communications Advisory Committee, and Reston Neighborhoods Advisory Committee the task of developing a community-wide snow removal mobilization plan for the implementation in 2015. Do I hear a second? A second from Director Cohn. Okay, any discussion? Yep, Richard?
Can I ask where this fits into the strategic plan goals and objectives for 2014?
You may ask. Ask away.
Does this fit in our budget?
Let's start with, have we established this as a priority for 2014?
As a board, you haven't. Each of the committees is responsible for setting their own work plan in line with the strategic plan.
Okay, so where would this fall in the strategic plan?
If I were to pick if I were to, actually, Andy is probably hitting it on the head. Community engagement, community, sustainability and community viability. I can hit different areas. What I heard from all of the emails going around and seeing what the concerns are, it's that this is a communication and an awareness issue. So it might be as simple as having these three committees come together and talk about the ability to come up with a communications plan that when we know we're going to get a big snowstorm, we hit all of our channels, just as you said, the pyramids and things like that. What do we need to do in order to inform the community that we need to be mindful of the importance of making sure that it's accessible to all residents of the community? Driving around and seeing somebody walking in the middle of the street when I know a sidewalk is there, is a little disconcerting. So it's kind of a reminder of people to do their civic duty and community engagement. That was the intent of it. And, you know, my communications team can sit down and come up with something. However, I think that there's a lot to be gained by our committee volunteers who are experts in this. That was the intent.
Richard, let's do Richard, and then we'll do John, if that's okay. Oh, John, okay.
I would sort of make the same comment again. Is it a worthwhile activity for the committee? Absolutely. Do they need a plaque with a prescription on it to take on something like this? No. They can put it within their plan. My main objection is two things. That was a clever working of our strategic plan, but it was a valid question, and I can't think of any issue that we couldn't somehow work into our strategic plan. So let's be real about this. Second, the motion talks about implementation in 2015. Implementation means money. This was not part of our budget. If you're asking that someone suggest a plan for future implementation, okay, maybe that's, but to say to the committee, come up with a plan for implementation in 2015, and we can't do that, why would we ask them to do that?
Well, again, if the objective is to facilitate a community dialogue on this subject, that's one thing. If you're talking about the cost being the cost of holding, a forum or several forums, I think that's a manageable issue. I think so, and I don't think that you need to implement that. In fact, doing that in 2015 is too late. Okay? If you're going to have that dialogue, you need to have that dialogue, and Joe, don't hit me, you need to have that dialogue in August or September before the season. You don't have, that's why discussing this all now is all well and good, but there were no priorities here. There's no critical need for us to have this discussion right now, except the planning to facilitate the community dialogue before the next season.
Okay,
May I?
Kate, yep.
So I want to answer your question now that I have the strategic plan in front of me. It goes right to community leadership and engagement, the goal to be a leader representing Reston's interests, promoting partnerships, and fostering community involvement. And it goes right to the first objective, regularly engage the diverse elements of the community on issues and opportunities that impact Reston. And that, if I recall, that particular objective has been identified by this board as one of its strategic priorities.
And that's fine.
Okay, but I wanted to answer the question.
Sounds like Kate's saying asked and answered.
But however,
so there's nothing that we need to do. And the reason I asked,
fit that sentence. Okay.
in
this community that isn't described by that.
But however, I also wanted to note that the committees do come up with their own work plans, and if we are to ask them to do anything more, it has to be approved by the board. That's why I brought it before you. That is in the committee's resolution,
So
and that's the only intent.
but you just said that that community engagement fits in our plan, in our strategic plan.
In the board's plan.
In the board's strategic plan, okay? So, and the committees are supposed to take action based on the strategic plan. So the message is already there. We need to recraft the message or the direction based on what you're saying. And but it's a discussion. It's an engagement. It's a forum. It's a give and take of ideas. That can take place. We don't have to tell anybody to do that other than say to those committees, and you say to the communications staff, help them figure this out.
Okay, I'm gonna sort of bring us to a close. We've got a motion, we've had a second. The way I saw it, it was, when I hear about, and I volunteered on the volunteer day several years ago. I thought it was well run. It was a wonderful thing. And I think what I hear when we talk about this is some kind of roadmap that sits on the shelf of a mobilization plan for, some people would like to volunteer for things, but wouldn't just go out and do it on their own. But if there's a mobilization plan that puts a framework around volunteering, the way I have heard this conversation, the way I interpret this motion, that between our Neighborhood Advisories Committee, the Communications Committee, the PBAC, they would create a framework such that we would have a structured volunteer type of program, and that would be sitting on our shelf to mobilize. That's what I'm reading this as, and I, in terms of cost, don't see a ton of cost in there, but that would have to be brought out, I guess, when the committees brought their plan back to us. With that, last comment, anybody, or then we're going to call the question.
Why you haven't raised their hands since the meeting was beautiful?
Totally forgotten.
Sorry?
Why have people raise their hands when they vote?
You've forgotten the motion. Want me to read it again? Okay, I'm going to read the motion one more time. Direct the Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee,
There were two motions, that's what, okay.
Communications Advisory Committee, and Reston Neighborhoods Advisory Committee the task of developing a community-wide snow removal mobilization plan for implementation in 2015. That was the motion as read and seconded.
And can I mean, just
Last
one
word.
quick question, and that is, what was the rationale for saying 2015? Are you saying 2015 a year from now, or 2015?
The beginning of the year. I think that during the course of 2014, we can come up with a plan that can be implementable by next season. I'm not sure we can come up with one by Monday, with the next
I'm just trying to
snowstorm.
figure out, are you
No.
trying to have an implementation plan that will work for next winter or the following winter?
Next winter.
Okay.
With that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as read, please signify by saying aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, and raise your hand, please.
Piffle.
We've got one piffle. Okay, and any more nays? How about some abstentions? Anybody abstaining?
Abstain.
Abstain?
Okay, Ellen abstained then. So we have-
Okay, so what was the totals on that?
4 aye, 2 nay,
And
1
one abstain.
abstention.
So motion passes.
Yes.
Okay, now on to the PBAC motion. Based upon the letter that Burton described to us, I'm going to read the motion. Direct the Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee to coordinate with RA staff and the Transportation Advisory Committee to refine their proposed letter to the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority regarding snow and ice removal from the Washington and Old Dominion Trail for review by the Board Planning Committee no later than May 2014. Do I hear a second?
Tim,
Second.
I will second that.
Okay, so this motion, as read, seems to be pointing the committees to work with staff to revise the letter to be brought forth before the BPC to see if that could then come before the board, I guess, after May as a letter that we would approve to go to the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority. So it won't help anybody this winter, it sounds like.
So, yeah, the motion is modified from the one that's in our packet, right? So,
This is the one provided to me after discussing with our CEO.
I will just say that I think the idea here is to allow people to use their bicycles and to use the trail system and the WNOD over a longer period. And this is of significant interest to people who do that and rest in a lot of our members of our community. And I think this does fit inside our strategic plan. Sorry. Along with everything else, I guess. It's an important thing to a large group in our community. And I don't see any major costs associated with sending a letter. So I don't think it has any budget implications.
Okay, Mike, you're next, please.
And I'd just like to build on that. There were a lot of emails sent around regarding concerns of the community about safety and otherwise. And I frankly think it's appropriate that we have this discussion to demonstrate we're responsive. Is this a strategic priority? I think being responsive to our members absolutely is. Are there other issues that we should be dealing with more efficiently and effectively so that we can deal with these as well? Absolutely. So let's just get on with it.
Yeah, I think.
Eve?
Yeah, if we're gonna be you know, you can't say.
Well,
you wanna-
Eve's talking and Burton, please.
You
Okay,
can't
and then
say
we'll-
that you wanna be a multimodal community and then not, like, you know,
Absolutely.
put the stuff in place to support it, so.
Okay, as the writer of this letter, I will let Burton.
The motion be modified so that the chair of the PBAC committee coordinates with the chair of the TAC and RA staff to finalize the letter, so that it actually doesn't come back to our full committee for a rehash.
I'll second that.
It sounds like we have a friendly amendment from Mike Samuel. But I'm asking Mike Samuel, will you friendly amend our motion to say that it's the chairperson of the PBAC and the chairperson?
I would recommend that the chairs of the committees get together and redraft the note accordingly.
But if
So-
Andy and Tim accept it, we don't have to have an amendment. Do you accept it?
I accept that friendly amendment.
Accept it, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then we don't need an amendment.
Okay. So, any other comments on this one before we call the question?
Yeah.
Yes, Director Higgins.
Well, I plan to vote in favor of this. In the interest of time.
It fits the strategic plan.
All the while wishing that it had simply been,
Done.
let's write the letter and move on. Not make it, this is going to take 6 weeks to happen.
Got it.
So unnecessary. We all agree that the trail ought to be plowed if they will do it. We're asking them to please do it. Write the letter and let's go.
All right, let's do it.
All right,
Let's
well,
do it.
Call for the
Want to
question,
modify
please.
one more time?
I
then? Shorten
think-
the timeframe? Mr.
Call the
Higgins?
question.
I'm gonna,
Call for the question, please.
yeah, I'm gonna call the question at this stage. All those in favor of the motion as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against, please signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. That was a tough one, but we made it through. All right, we're going on to agenda item I, volunteer appointments to committee. I'm going to move to approve the appointment of Melissa Gildea as a member of the Environmental Advisory Committee for a term of 3 years ending February 2017, and the appointment of Alice Lee Albritton as a member of the Seniors Advisory Committee for a term of 3 years ending February 2017. Do I hear a second?
Richard, second.
Okay, any questions, comments, discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Motion passes. Welcome, Melissa and Alice. All right, now we're on to item J, Elections Committee recommendation, form of the 2014 election guide and ballot for apartment owners election. And Mr. Robichaud is here in person to help us. Hello,
Yeah,
Ed.
still awake, thank you.
More about snow than he never wanted to hear, but okay.
Ed Robichaud, Chair of the Election Committee. You have in your packet the proposed Category B election materials, to wit the letter to the apartment owners, their actual paper ballot, and the candidate statement for the one person running. Quick review, remember these are the apartment owners, the Category B ones, 28 owners representing 3,861 rental units. They have the same 10% quorum requirement. They only vote by paper, and the bylaws require you to approve these materials that will be sent out March 3rd. And since I have the forum, a public reminder that we have a March 3rd candidate forum here at 7 p.m. Then the mail ballots will drop at that same time. Voting actually opens online at March 3rd. We've done screen testing, and that's locked in as of tonight. Please recommend that all your friends and family vote online to save us some pocket change. There'll be a reminder mail piece on March 17th, and voting closes March 31st at 5 p.m. Results to be announced April 8th at the annual meeting. The only difference from this and the other election materials you previously approved is that, again, it's only by mail-in, and the Category B owners are allowed to do a write-in, where we don't permit that in the other A and Cs. Any questions?
Do we have questions for Ed? Okay, Richard?
Yeah, I would just like to strongly recommend that the cover letter include some kind of sentence or whatever regarding what you just said about the write-in. Okay, it's to make it clear that they can write in. I know that it says it on the ballot. But I would just add, and I'm assuming the fact that this is just kind of like a placeholder document, because these are not all going for 1527 Cameron Crescent, right?
Yeah, that's a sample. The candidate statement is locked. I guess we can change that cover letter to remind them of the possibility of a write-in. I don't see a huge problem there, although the ballot seems to make that clear, but I'm not opposed to including that in the cover letter.
Okay, any other questions for Ed? We haven't read the motion yet. This is more just question time. So any other questions for Ed before we head to the motion? Background information? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Ed. I will read the motion. Move to approve the 2014 election ballot template and related materials, I guess I will say as amended with the comments from Richard? As amended for apartment owners election as proposed by the Elections Committee.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion, comments, questions before we call the question? All right, then, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Question, if you don't mind.
Please.
Director Cohn just asked, in the Hunters Woods Dogwood ballot, or ballot guide, you've got the Hunters Woods Dogwood candidate as well as the at-large candidates, because the people who live in that district are eligible to vote for those candidates. So that's why you see all of the at-large candidates in that ballot guide, along with the information about the Hunters Woods Dogwood District candidate.
Richard just clarified that for me while I was sitting here.
There was a question same question, so that's the intent of that.
Okay, I'm not so confused anymore.
All right, we move on to item K. Item K is change date of March 2014 board meeting to provide opportunity to attend the March 27th Barron Cameron Park Master Plan public meeting. I think Kate will discuss a little bit about that, or the day before, or is it in the motion?
Second?
Okay, no, I just read the item so far.
I'm
so
sorry.
I'll read the motion next. Do you have a question?
No, go ahead.
And I'll go ahead and read the motion.
Yeah.
Move to approve the change of date for the March 27th, 2014 board meeting to Wednesday, March 26th, 2014, in order to provide the board an opportunity to attend the Barron Cameron Park Master Plan public meeting on March 27th, 2014. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
And Ellen to the pods.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So, Richard, comments?
Yeah, I mean,
It's going to be very confusing if we change the date of the March 27th meeting.
John, we've got a comment from Richard, if that's okay.
I think of John's comment. I just think that we have other meetings that are scheduled throughout the year that conflict with this board's meeting as well. We have 9 members on this board. We have a quorum of 5. It seems to me that if there are a couple of directors who feel it important enough to go to this meeting, that they can go. If they would rather go to that meeting than participate in the board meeting, that's fine, okay? And report back. I mean, we've seen the plan, we know what the plan says, we know what the park authority is looking to do, and we pretty much know what the public comments are going to be. So I just, although this would help for my travel plans, okay, I don't think that this is, that moving the board meeting, the scheduled board meeting is necessary.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Any other comments?
Does,
Eve?
Is there a concern about not creating conflict that the public can't attend both? Or was it that the board wanted to attend both?
I know I took it as both. If someone attended our meeting, they would necessarily not be able to attend the other.
Not that ours are usually, barn burners or anything.
Sorry, Tim?
Well, I'll speak as North Point representative. Barron Cameron Park is very important to people in my constituents, and I have to go to that meeting. And I think, Mike is among my constituents, I think Kate is too. Yeah. I think having a presence of the RA board at this kind of meeting, where you're going to have a large number of the leaders in our community present, is important for our board and for the appearance of our board, and to demonstrate that the board is actually concerned about the issues that are really going to affect them. And this is a big one. And, I would move that if we aren't going to move the meeting, maybe we should just cancel it, because I think, in fact, the Barron Cameron issue is more important than whatever it would be on the agenda on March 27th.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Mike, you had your hand?
Yeah, for Reston as a community, I'm an at-large representative. Recreation facilities that are being talked about, renovations of facilities such as Barron Cameron is very, very important. And I think that the way we engage with the park authority and others about those amenities is really important. I know, for speaking as a resident in the area, the Longwood Grove area, that's been of real concern to that community. And so from both perspectives, I think it's important that RA be represented, the board be represented at that meeting.
Thank you, Mike. Can I just do a quick informal poll? Does the movement from Thursday to Wednesday preclude any of the sitting board members from making the meeting Wednesday? I mean, are any of you saying, hey, gosh, I was going to go Thursday, but I can't go on Wednesday? I'd like to hear, anybody know that for a fact?
The date is when?
It's the 27th, and it would be the day before the Wednesday.
26th.
Board meeting, 27th.
If anybody,
Barron Cameron.
if I guess that would help me with my vote. If a bunch of people couldn't make it, then I guess that would make a good reason why we didn't do that. Personally, I could make the Wednesday or the Thursday, so maybe my last one.
As can I.
So anybody who would be precluded from joining on the Wednesday?
John's still
Okay.
looking it up.
John's still looking it up, okay.
I put forth a lot of controversy this evening, so I'm interested to
Who knew?
how I would survive this evening, yes.
I'm going to then ask if there's any other comments before we call the question. And I hear none. So, all those in favor of the motion as read, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Okay?
Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to move to item L, which will be a highly quick and abbreviated version of item L, I'm hoping. So, but no pressure, CEO.
No pressure.
As I promised some, we'd be out by 9:30, and I lied through my teeth. Sorry.
Okay. So you've got the CEO report in your packets, but I did want to mention a couple of other things that are not necessarily in the packet. One is, as some of you had indicated earlier this evening, testing out that site review plan, development, redevelopment plan that we had for PRC properties in place, giving it a go. One was held on February the 10th for the Lake Ann revitalization plan. The The second was held on Monday for the Lake Ann Fellowship House plan. And we purposefully begun that process, inviting our committees. Got great representation, especially on Monday evening. The Design Review Board was represented, the Transportation Advisory Committee, the EAC, the Pedestrian and Bicycling Advisory Committee, and Larry said it was very important that the
And the
seniors-
SAC.
Right, the Seniors Advisory Committee were also a part of the conversation. And we had 30 turnout, not just our committee members, but also others in the community. Got valuable information about what's going on a site development project, a redevelopment project, as well as giving input to the developer back. So we're beginning the process of testing that out, and there'll be more to come. On March the 12th, we're gathering those committees back up to talk about what they thought about the process, what may or may not be missing. Larry and I are also working with John McBride to have initial conversations with the leadership of the Planning and Zoning Committee, as well as the Design Review Board, and we've had some very good and positive feedback from them. We've also seen a need that we want to include some representation from IPAR, because as a part of the planning process, it's important to make sure the developers understand the importance of art in the community. One of the things that happened this week internally is our Director of Administrative Services and HR put on a fantastic program, brought an outside individual and a third party in to do performance evaluation training. Believe it or not, that's a pretty important activity that happens in the organization. Not only did our managers who are responsible for that enjoy that, but they wanted more. So we'll be doing a lot more of that so we get quality program. And I really appreciate the time that Alice put in to do that program. What I'd like to do this evening is some of you before the meeting got a chance to meet our new CFO, David Harris. We are very pleased to have him here. He joined us on February the 18th. Comes with some phenomenal experience both in the finance area as well as in IT and business process review. He has had the opportunity to look over a number of items with regard to what's going on internally and externally, but he has a couple of things that he would like to report out to you on this evening. So I give the floor to David.
Hi, everyone. It was nice to meet you. And I'm going to go off script here. I have about 5 gap pronouncements that I want to go through in detail. So,
First and last meeting.
Yeah. Great. Right. No, it's been great. All the people that I've met, the staff, the volunteers, their dedication and enthusiasm for the community and the organization has blown me away. So the first 2 weeks have been great. The primary focus right now is obviously the financial statement audit. So far, no issues uncovered that are concerning to the auditors, and they're targeting, right near the end of March for financial statement issuance. The second big ticket item was the fiscal committee met on Monday, and Kate and I are just about ready to send out RFPs for investment advisors. So that some of our reserve funds can be utilized to earn some substantial income, more than the 1 to 5 basis points that we're earning now. We expect an advisor to be in place and the plan operating no later than June, hopefully sooner than that. And I'm sure 100 other things are going to come up, but those are the 2 big ticket items that I'm working on now. And feel free to call me or ask me if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. And
thanks.
And I got a chance to attend the fiscal committee meeting on Monday, and it was a pleasure to watch you engage with the other members and the collegial atmosphere that you created there. So thank you very much, David. Looking forward to working with you.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
And that's all you have. Any questions for our CEO? I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. And do I have a second? All those in favor?
Mike, second.
Adios. Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoyed.
Anyone opposed?
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? It was wonderful having everybody here. Thank you so much for coming. Good night. Wherever you are, Ken.